Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the really fascinating historical truth behind taxes, and specifically, how the wealthy legally protect their money. If you've ever stared at your paycheck, just wondering where on earth all those deductions are going, or how some people seem to be playing by a totally different set of financial rules, well, you're in the right place. We're unpacking the core lessons from Chapter 4 of our source material today, shedding light on where taxes actually came from, and this powerful shield known as the corporation.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to kick things off by debunking the Robin Hood myth, trace the actual history of taxes, reveal the secret mechanics of corporations, talk about building your financial IQ, and wrap it all up with some actionable next steps.
Let's jump right into Part 1, the Robin Hood myth, hero or crook. So, we've all heard the romantic story, right? Robin Hood taking from the rich to give to the poor. Most of us grew up thinking he was the ultimate hero, but in our source material, the author's rich dad actually called Robin Hood a crook. And here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. That exact take from the rich fantasy, that's exactly what was used to sell the concept of taxes to the masses in the first place. People voted for taxes because they honestly believed they would only punish the ultra-wealthy. But the ironic reality? The rich aren't the ones being heavily taxed. It's the middle class, specifically the educated upper-income middle class who ultimately ended up carrying the burden and footing the bill.
Now, to really understand how this tax burden shifted, we need to look at two totally different mindsets presented in the text: the government bureaucrat versus the capitalist. The author compares his educated dad, who worked in government, with his rich dad, the capitalist. In this framework, a bureaucrat's success is basically measured by how much they can grow their organization, spending a bigger budget, hiring more people. If you don't spend your allotted funds, you might literally lose them in the next budget cycle. But on the flip side, the capitalist measures success by maximum efficiency, doing more with less, spending less, and hiring fewer people to get the exact same or even better results. Because of that bureaucratic structure, the government's appetite for money just naturally grew and grew, requiring more and more of our tax dollars just to feed those expanding organizations.
Which brings us to Part 2, the history of taxes, from temporary to permanent.
Okay, this is wild. Taxes weren't always this permanent fixture in our lives. Originally, in both England and America, there were absolutely zero regular taxes. None. They actually started out as these temporary, one-off funds levied just to pay for wars. In Britain, people chipped in to fight Napoleon from 1799 to 1816. In America, it was to fund the Civil War in the 1860s. But then, things shifted. In 1874, England made the income tax permanent, and in 1913, the U.S. followed suit with the 16th Amendment. So, how did they convince an anti-tax public to just agree to this? Like I mentioned earlier, they sold it as a way to punish the rich. That's literally how they got the votes to make it constitutional law. But once the government got a taste and its appetite grew, that tax bracket inevitably had to expand downward.
And that trickle-down effect leads us to a pretty staggering reality today. Get this. The average American works 4 to 5 months out of the year just to cover their taxes. Think about that. If you work from January all the way to May, every single cent you earn is essentially going straight to the government. It completely proves that the original plan to tax the rich eventually just trickled down to everyone else. Basically, the harder you work as an employee, the more you pay.
All right, let's move into Part 3, the secret of corporations, the escape hatch. So, the wealthy didn't just sit back and accept these new taxes, no way. They reacted. They used their financial knowledge to build an escape hatch, and they did it by utilizing corporations. Now, we really need to clear up a massive misconception here. When you hear corporation, you might picture a giant factory with smoke billowing out, or some fancy boardroom full of executives. But it's not. A corporation is quite literally just a legal file folder sitting in an attorney's office registered with the state. That's it. It is a legal body without a soul. This concept goes all the way back to the days of sailing ships, where wealthy investors created these entities to limit their personal risk. If a ship sank, they only lost whatever money they put into that specific voyage. The rest of their wealth was totally safe. And today, the modern wealthy use that exact same folder strategy to shield their assets from the taxman and from lawsuits. The actual mechanics of this protection are super fascinating. The corporate structure sits entirely outside of your personal income statement and balance sheet. It acts as its own separate entity, with its own income and its own expenses. So by funneling their income through this separate legal entity, the wealthy effectively put a shield around their personal finances. They control the assets entirely, but on paper, personally, they own practically nothing.
Which brings us to this profound quote from the author's Rich Dad. If you work for money, you give the power to your employer. If money works for you, you keep the power and control it. This really hits the nail on the head regarding power. The author points out that the biggest bully in the world isn't actually your boss, it's the taxman. And the taxman will always take more if you let him. Knowing how to use legal entities like corporations gives you a fighting chance. It's all about keeping the power in your own hands, rather than just handing it over because you don't know the law.
Moving on to part 4, building your financial IQ, the Xerox story.
To really anchor this concept, the author shares a fantastic personal story. Back in his mid-20s, he was working for Xerox. He was making great money as a top salesperson, but he noticed something really frustrating. The harder he worked, the bigger his tax deductions became. So in 1974, he took action and formed his first corporation. Now, he didn't quit his day job right away. Instead, he used his new corporation to invest his sales commissions into Hawaiian real estate. Before long, the cash flow from those properties was so strong that his company actually bought him a Porsche. His coworkers thought he was just blowing his commissions, but in reality, he was buying assets. And the kicker? His corporation bought that Porsche using pre-tax dollars. He basically used the corporate structure to legally escape the employee rat race.
But you can't just blindly go open a corporation and expect a free Porsche. You need what the source calls financial IQ. Think of this as the synergy of 4 distinct pillars. First, accounting. That's your left brain ability to actually read numbers and financial statements. Second, investing. The creative right brain science of making your money make more money. Third, understanding markets, really grasping the fundamental drivers of supply and demand. And finally, the law, knowing how to utilize the tax advantages and protections of a corporation. When you wrap a corporate structure around those first 3 pillars, that's when you see truly explosive financial growth.
Finally, let's wrap this up in part 5, summary and next steps, escaping the trap.
Okay, if you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer, you have to remember this: the ultimate legal loophole of the wealthy. It all boils down to 2 very different paths. On path number 1, employees earn their money, they pay taxes immediately on those earnings, and they just try to scrape by on whatever's left over. But on path number 2, business owners with corporations earn money, spend everything they legally can as business expenses using pre-tax dollars, and then they only pay taxes on what's left at the very end. That simple little flip in the order of operations, that is literally the difference between walking and flying when it comes to building long-term wealth.
So let's talk about what you should do next. The source material makes the lesson incredibly clear. If you are only relying on a paycheck from an employer, you are leaving yourself wide open and vulnerable to the taxman. The solution isn't to get mad about it, it's to get smart. For your immediate next step, you need to actively educate yourself on the protections and benefits that legal entities like corporations can provide for your assets. Don't let a lack of financial education penalize you anymore. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to really spark your journey. How will you take control of your financial power today, build your asset column, and protect it using the law? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.
Welcome